Welcome, everybody. Today's guest on The Best Boss Ever is David Miller. David and I have known each other for the better part of 25, maybe even a few more years than that. We first met when he was the marketing director at Universal Studios Hollywood. We both had the great pleasure of working at that awesome institution. And then David's career took a little bit of a very interesting thing. And David, I want to bring you into this conversation right now. We can start a little bit about how you got to Universal and where and how you honed your marketing skills. But your job today for the past several years is really an interesting one as the Chief Marketing Officer for the San Diego Zoo and Wildlife Alliance. We both live here in San Diego. We're, 10 miles apart or something like that. But, this is no small thing. And I want you to sort of walk us through the Universal because if memory serves, you actually did 2 tours of duty at Universal.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the show. Can't thank you enough for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Carl. And I so respect you and what you do, and listening to your podcasts. You got me all excited to listen to all of them. So that's my goal, is to listen to all of them. I really enjoy your guests, but also your perspective on each guest, because you have a way of connecting very uniquely to each guest. And I think that's a talent. So I want to commend you on that ability.
Well, thank you. Those are kind words. I appreciate it.
But happy to see you again and to do this podcast. It's very exciting, and I'm honored to be included with your other interviewees.
Great. Well, listen, entertainment, theme parks, sell a ticket, get people in to have a great experience. Not that much different than selling tickets or membership to the zoo, but the bookends of your career, right? From theme park days to now leading marketing for arguably the best zoo in the world. You've had a lot of twists and turns. The Philharmonic in Los Angeles, to name one. So
yeah.
Over to you now. Walk us through sort of how you got to where you are right now, what you learned along the way, and most importantly, the best boss or bosses or leaders or influencers that you had along the way who really left a serious imprint on you and helped guide you, down your career path.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Thank you, Carl. It's interesting. When I started my career, I didn't think about where I would end up as far as the focus on destination marketing. And if you look back on my career, I've been responsible for putting butts in seats, butts through turnstiles, butts in beds at Four Seasons in Southern California. Universal, first term in the mid-90s, driving consumers to Universal Studios Hollywood. I then went to Four Seasons and drove consumers to the property. It was a kind of a health and wellness property within a Four Seasons. It was this new concept, a little bit ahead of its time. And then went to the LA Philharmonic, where I was responsible for driving butts into seats at the world famous Walt Disney Concert Hall, which I helped open, which was extremely exciting to brand Walt Disney Concert Hall. And it's funny, I started in 2002, and the hall was opening in the fall of 2003. And they said, well, your first project is to work on the new Walt Disney Concert Hall and create the entire brand in the positioning and everything. And at the time, classical music was very difficult. It was not very accessible. And Frank Gehry built the Walt Disney Concert Hall at the ground level. It was very open, a lot of intention around that versus the old Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, which was up on a hill and chandeliers and very inaccessible. And it was all about making classical music accessible to consumers with a beautiful building and a very acoustic interior that was perfect for classical music, which the Dorothy Chandler was not. So to be able to reposition the hall and the LA Phil brand, but also classical music and be able to try to change perceptions of classical music with consumers and bring in new consumers was really exciting. Then from there, Universal brought me back which was really exciting. It was nice to come back, and it was a broader position when I was there the first time. I started out as assistant advertising manager, and I was promoted up to vice president of advertising, but very defined advertising, paid pretty much almost all offline at the time. And then brought back to be more of a brand marketing position of oversight over all communication to consumers. So not just the paid, but actually the promotions and all online, offline, having the total scope of communication to a consumer and really understanding the consumer. So it was great to be able to come back. It was an amazing time. I was there 12 years during probably the most expansive growth that theme park had ever had. They were just purchased by Comcast. Comcast was investing heavily into the parks. Steve Burke came from Disney Parks, and he saw the value of parks, and so versus GE, which had previously owned Universal, and they were more harvesting the parks and squeezing them for the revenue and not really investing. So it was a nice time to be there. And from a marketing standpoint, having new products every year, from Transformers the ride and King Kong the ride and Harry Potter and Jurassic World, the ride, all of those things opened during the time that I was there. And it was an amazing time to be there and to grow the attendance from about 3.9 million when I started to about 8.5 million in the peak of 2019, right before COVID. So exciting time. And then where I am now, it's San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. We operate the San Diego Zoo and the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. They're two separate parks in San Diego and Escondido. Coming in, I feel like I always come in at the perfect time. I came in right when, we're rebranding. We want to evolve who we are from being the San Diego Zoo and the park to being known as a global conservation organization. So we changed our name from a B2B name, which was San Diego Zoo Global, to the B2C name, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, which is really intended to be communicated to consumers and for consumers to understand that we're a conservation organization first. That's our primary work, is 200 projects around the world on 6 continents at any given time. We're working on projects protecting animals, saving animals from extinction, helping partners who are working with animals in the wild. And since we work with those species daily, 24/7, 365, we have really good techniques and understanding of those species, and we're able to teach our partners around the world to help improve the lives of those animals in the wild, because they're not able to access them as much as we are and really understand them. So we're working with orphaned elephants in Kenya, we're working with koalas in Australia, I could go on and on and on. And
well, we're going to get a chance to go on and on because I want to unpack that a little bit. But
yeah.
Because the audience, and I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say very few, if any, would understand the scope of what you just described and the role that the Alliance plays, not just here in San Diego and in the U.S. as obviously the most noteworthy organization of its kind, but globally. So I want to get there for sure, because it's super interesting to me because of the stewardship element that obviously the Alliance takes very seriously. Before we get there, so you get from Universal to the Four Seasons, the Philharmonic, back to Universal for 12 years. Give us a sense of, obviously somebody at Universal thought highly enough of you to bring you back, right? That doesn't happen all that often, although I've had the good luck and pleasure to work with the gent that you and I both worked for back in the day at Universal, Ron Benzie, and I did 3 tours of duty with Ron.
Yeah.
Still today, the best boss I ever had. But using that, share with us who had the most influence on you as a leader, David, and what you learned from that individual or individuals.
Well, you mentioned Ron. He wasn't my direct boss, so I didn't include him in my thinking about who my best boss has been. Although Ron is an amazing leader, and what he did and has done in his entire career is phenomenal. So I respect him immensely, and I'm jealous that you were able to work for him multiple times. But I think for me, I was thinking about kind of the best boss that I've had. And for me, I think it's really hard to isolate to one person because your career changes so much. What what's important when you start your career is very different from when you actually have experience and you start to, stand on your own and you are an expert in your specific area. Your boss then starts to become more of a collaborator, someone who can help block and tackle for you, and you can bounce ideas off of them and things like that. So I actually have two favorite bosses.
Good.
I have someone who I was just starting out, and it was at Universal. It was Sherry Herman, and I was just out of college, very green, and she was vice president of advertising for Universal. And there was a position, which was a new position that was created, which is key. It's always good to get into a position that's brand new, because then there are no boundaries and you can make it your own, which is what I did. And so that job, working with Sherry, who was tough, by the way, she was tough, very difficult, but I learned a lot from her. I learned the foundation of things that I needed throughout my career. She was an amazing budget. She had amazing budget management skills, and our budget was in the multi-million dollars for advertising for Universal. And so you had to get it right. You couldn't start to mess up, and you mess up and it's $1 million difference. And, so you had to keep very tight controls, which she did. And she taught me all about budgeting, and I've learned it and I've used it my entire career. And it was so important, but also things like, who to CC first on a memo. All of those things when you're starting out and you don't know, you don't want to do something wrong or offend the president or the vice president or something. And so there are these things that I learned and that helped create a very strong foundation for me for my entire career. And I probably learned the most from her. I also wanted to talk about just every boss will teach you something. I always think I want to constantly learn. I want to take every meeting, in every meeting, even if it's a boring meeting or maybe it doesn't pertain to me, I'm going to learn something in that meeting or that meeting with a vendor or something. And it goes the same with your boss. Even if you don't respect that person ultimately, or you don't believe in the direction they're going or what they're doing or how they're doing it, you're absolutely going to learn either what to do or what not to do, what to take in, what not to take in. It's going to help refine you. So that's been my mantra. And I talk to my team about that. Just learn, take advantage of every call. And also you'll be more engaged. You're in a meeting, you don't want to look bored, you don't want to look uninterested. By wanting to learn whatever it is in that meeting, even if it doesn't pertain to you, it's going to benefit you. And I talk to the team about, if you just sit at your desk with your head down doing your job, the world will change around you and you will not be the best person at that job pretty quickly.
Right.
You have to take classes, take webinars, listen to amazing podcasts, go to conferences, learn from vendors. I always have vendors talk to me about, they're pitching, and I'll say, okay, give me some case studies. And they'll talk about new technologies, new ways of doing things that I hadn't heard of. I did because I was willing to take a vendor call and listen to why they were pitching me, but they were also teaching me. So that's always important from any boss to take what you can, good or bad. So the other person is my current boss, Sean Dixon, who's right now he's interim president and CEO of San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. And, he, at this stage of my career, what's important is the relationship as collaborator, thought partner, he helps me block and tackle. He has a completely different experience. He came up through operations. He was at Vail Resorts, and he was recently COO, Chief Operating Officer. And so he comes with an operational lens. So that helps with my area of marketing to connect and learn more and understand more about the needs of the product, and the product being the safari park. Operational lens, that helps me think about how do we craft our marketing differently? How do we talk to the consumer differently about the product? And so I've learned a lot from him because he came up a different way,
Right.
he's not a marketing expert. He didn't come up through marketing, but he knows the product so well, and he knows good marketing. And so he's able to help guide me in the right direction. And so it's a very different relationship that I have with Sean than I had with Sherry when I was starting out, and I was more teacher-pupil relationship.
Right.
Much more in that space, where now it's more collaboration and respect and an understanding of my expertise and his expertise and how.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, David. There's a moment in time in your career path where I'm gonna use parlance here. You no longer look at the person you report to as your boss. You look at them as your word, a collaborator, a partner, a colleague, if you will, a co-visioned approach to your respective roles in the organization. And those roles optimally are complementary. Each feeds the other in the same way that your relationship with Sean, I suppose, has evolved over the last 5 years. It has to. Those kinds of things are go without saying on the one hand. On the other, the mutual respect you have, the trust you have for each other, the acknowledgement that, hey, David, you're the chief marketing officer here. I'm not. I'm operationally focused, but together we can take 1 + 1 and make it 3, 4, or 5, right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, an operation can't survive without marketing, and marketing can't survive without the product, without the operations of the products. That connection, I think, strengthens both his role as well as my role together. So I so like the relationship and respect Sean's leadership in what we've been able to accomplish.
Well, you've accomplished a lot because I live in the market and have lived in this market for a long time. The zoo, and it's what we always called it, right? I mean, at a certain point, there was the wild animal park, there was the zoo. That now they're all part of your alliance. The point I want to make here is you and Sean now as the co-leaders, you on marketing, Sean as the interim CEO. You have a massive remit. You mentioned earlier on, 200 organizations that you work with around the world. All of that said, and I want to hear more about that. I think it's super interesting. But to sit and be responsible for the stewardship required to manage what is commonly known as the best and most important zoo/wildlife alliance, certainly in this country and perhaps even around the world, is no small task, because you have to recognize and understand the legacy of the organization, the platform, the awesome positioning that the San Diego Zoo and Wildlife Alliance has globally. So you need to protect that position and make sure that everything y'all do from both an operational side as well as a marketing side, it supports the vision and the mission and the positioning of the organization. That said, you also have a huge challenge to continue to grow the organization, whether it's more memberships, more tiers of membership, more guests experiencing the zoo and the wild animal park each year. But moreover, this is when I want you to sort of go into the role that your plays globally, not just wildlife management, but preservation, species preservation, and making sure that, I'll make it up, California condors never go extinct, that they actually continue to procreate and grow and become a vital and vibrant population again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's truly the most exciting organization that most people don't really know the depth and breadth of what it is. And that's really the reason for the brand change when I started, was to focus on making sure people understood what we do. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But first and foremost, our 2 properties, the zoo and the park, but also our conservation organization, our conservation team that works with those and their projects, 200 projects that we're conducting around the world. They are such experts. We have so many scientists and veterinary experts that are part of our organization that do such great work. I get to just talk about it,
Right.
to just tell people, which has been such an amazing experience to be able to do that. And again, we weren't doing it prior to 2021 very well. Because it wasn't a priority. It wasn't a priority to make sure people understood it. Things are changing. Younger consumers don't have great perceptions of zoos.
Right.
That zoos are bad and that zoos have animals and charge you to see them. And there are a lot of zoos, unfortunately, around the country that are not great. We are governed by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which has very, very strict standards to be accredited. Out of about 3,000, 3,500 zoos in the country, only about 250 are accredited by the AZA that they can meet that standard, which we of course meet that standard. But a lot of people go to those other, 500, 2,700 zoos and see things that aren't great, that perpetuate that negative experience. And so part of what we're trying to do is convey how zoos should be, why zoos exist. In a perfect world, you wouldn't go to a zoo. In your mind, you would go to a research facility. Not a zoo, but a research facility of understanding these animals. And because of working with these animals, we're able to improve the lives of animals that are still left in the wild. And that's important. Kids, I forget the exact phrasing, but if they're not exposed to nature, if they're not exposed to animals, they'll never want to protect them in the future. They need that interaction. And we opened an attraction at formerly our children's zoo, but it's called Wildlife Explorers Base Camp, which is all primarily for kids, young adults. And in our learning, we determined that kids today spend about half as much time as their parents outside. And that on average, children spend less time outside than maximum security prisoners spend outside. And that's all because of video games and things. They're just not interacting. They're not going outside. And so if they're not going outside, they're not interacting with nature, or they're not understanding animals. We need that to have future conservationists or people that want to protect wildlife in the future.
Right.
When children come to the zoo and they experience animals and they fall in love with a giraffe and they want to protect that giraffe. Same with pandas, same with, with pretty much every species. But the evolution of our brand is really intended to become at least a national brand, not a Southern California brand, but a national brand.
Right.
And ultimately a global brand. That's my responsibility, and my team's responsibility is to figure out how we reposition how we talk to consumers, where we talk to them, when we talk to them, so that we can start to reposition to become not just a destination location, but a brand that people can access wherever they are. Historically, to access or to interact with us, it was primarily around visitation.
Right.
Realigning all of our memberships and things that we offer to make it available domestically, but also internationally, so that you can engage with us. Even if you never come to Southern California, you can engage with us, learn from us, and hopefully support us in that work that we're doing around the world.
So let's talk about the tools that you use to actually disseminate the messaging, right? Creating the messaging, creating the platform, having the right strategic planks in the marketing, if you will, manifesto, outward bound. That's great. But how do you distribute that message? And how does technology, or is technology playing a role in the distribution of that message? And I'm thinking of things like YouTube and YouTube clips. And I'm thinking of things like the technology story that is, there, and it's there, but nobody really understands what that is. So the more creative, innovative, your word collaborative you can be on not just crafting the message, but getting that message distributed and then engaged with, and then the arithmetic distribution potentially becomes a geometric distribution model as more folks engage with a message and then share it with their friends. So I said a mouthful.
You
Over to
did?
you.
Good. Okay. Well, the first thing I didn't mention when I talked about how we're evolving and we're expanding our base by trying to reposition us as a global conservation organization, all of that work, all of that change, we've needed to do without increasing our budget. So we weren't given, okay, here's $10 million to become a national brand or to do things differently or to expand. And all of those, the primary objective came without any real significant increase in budget. So what we had to do was start to think about how do we do what we do differently and talk about the experiences. First and foremost, we started with, we do have money to drive people to the zoo and we do have money to drive people to the safari park. So let's start to talk about that experience differently. So for instance, at the zoo, we talk about one of our current campaigns recently was You're a Superhero. And it talks about, you don't wear capes, you don't this, you know that. And simply by visiting the zoo, you're a superhero because you're helping protect animals around the world, because every dollar that goes to the zoo is used to help animals in the wild. So our formula, we are nonprofit. And the reason why we're nonprofit is because every dollar above our costs and donations that we receive, every dollar above what we pay to operate the experiences goes to conservation. So the more people visit, ultimately, the more funds we'll have to support conservation. And that's the critical balance of, we can't shift all of our messaging to be about our global conservation work, because if the attendance
Right.
dries up, then the revenue and the funds for conservation dries up. So we have this balance of, and you referenced it, how do you continue to grow attendance, grow membership, grow revenue, so that we can continue to increase the amount of money we're putting to conservation while also trying to reposition us. So we've looked at things like podcasting. We have now a podcast, which I think we have about 100 episodes of different stories, different. The great thing about my job is the product. It's never ending.
Yeah, it's endless.
The amount, every episode is about a different species. It's about panda, and we talk about the panda at the zoo, but then we talk about the pandas in the wild in China that we've also worked with to help grow the numbers of pandas that are in the wild. And that becomes such compelling content. And that content through podcast, as you know, it goes everywhere. It can be accessed everywhere. It's not an advertising buy that's in the Los Angeles DMA that only consumers
comes and goes, and
right. And another tactic that we used is PSAs. Because we're nonprofit, we're able to create very compelling public service announcements, and we provide those assets around the country, and we receive free advertising. And last year, the value was over $16 million in PSA media value, television, radio, digital, that we received on top of our paid advertising plan. So it helps us get into markets that we would never be able to afford or never put money towards.
Right.
Dallas, Des Moines, Iowa, all of these.
Sure. And so do you actually target physical geographies in your PSA strategies? And just so we're clear here, public service announcements back in the day, and you're going to help me understand this, help the audience understand this. A linear television station in a market with the franchise and the license was required by law to provide a certain amount of inventory of what otherwise would be paid advertising on a free basis called public service announcements to organizations just like yours. And I rather think, and I don't know, but as the fragmentation of media migrated from linear to streaming to You said it, podcast, online, YouTube. It's almost endless in that regard as well. I rather think that there aren't probably laws or requirements in place that mandate PSAs, but that organizations that recognize the value of not-for-profits and the value of what PSAs can bring to their audiences in terms of awareness and knowledge and understanding and things they don't know about the San Diego Zoo and Wildlife Alliance. Give us a sense of how you strategically approached that, because that's a super key part of being a nonprofit organization, is you have access to, in your words, $16 million worth of valued media that you don't pay a dime for other than the creative of the messaging.
Yeah. I mean, we talked earlier about my bouncing from for-profit, Universal, Four Seasons, to nonprofit. LA Philharmonic organization is a nonprofit organization in Los Angeles. San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance is nonprofit. When I was on the for-profit side at Universal, I craved the greater good, the mission that nonprofits had. The research is constant, where if a consumer is deciding between two brands, they'll always go for the brand that's helping the planet. I wanted that. I looked when I was at Universal, what's our greater good? What can we, besides shareholder value, what can we?
Right.
And I struggled with that. And I was so jealous. And coming here to San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance and having such an amazing mission, and to be able to convey that in our messaging and be able to take advantage of PSAs, which it truly is nonprofit. It has to fit a lot of requirements. You can't try to sell a ticket. You can't have a call to action. I mean, there are a lot of restrictions, but there are companies that will work with you to actually go to each market, and they'll provide the assets to those stations that are airing PSAs. And so there's an infrastructure, and we don't, because it's free, we don't strategically target markets. If a market will run our spot in Plano, Texas, or wherever, we'll take it. The thing about our brand, it was funny, I was looking at our geography, and usually you have the primary, you've got LA, of course, is a certain percentage. San Diego, of course, is a certain percentage. But then the other is like third largest. And that's because it's a bunch of little markets all bundled together.
Right.
To a pretty significant amount of our attendance. It's that spread out. If you're coming from Plano, Texas to San Diego, you probably come to the zoo. We have a great brand. We have a great awareness. And so when people come to San Diego, we have a high propensity that they will visit the zoo. The safari park's a little more difficult because it's about half an hour away. So it's proximity. It's a little harder, and we're working on that. We don't strategically say, don't go into that market, go into this one. We'll take whoever will air it, because it's free, and those consumers are all important. Of course, a spot that runs in New York or Chicago or Dallas is definitely more beneficial population wise, but we'll take it. So it's all about working with organizations that have relationships with all the stations and provide and help pitch the use of our PSA assets. Which the other part of it too is a lot of people provide PSAs that, because they're free, it's PSA, they don't really put much quality into the message. We focus on the quality, we focus on the creative. And I'll give you an example. This is a fun story. I think the work is really creative and it's engaging. What's included in the PSA is newspaper, which, yes, newspapers are still read and it's free. And so we were getting pickup because the ad looked great. The paper chose our creative over a lot of other creative, which doesn't look great, and they chose our creative. We were running so many full page color ads in this certain paper that one of our board members came in with it and said, what's going on with your marketing department? Why are they spending so much money on newspaper?
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think it was 400 insertions that we received over like a year and a half or something like that. But anyway, because it's free, we're able to be more broad than normal. If we're buying, we're very strategic, and but if it's free, we look at where we can expose our message. And again, it's messages that will go in places that we'd never be able to afford, and it's all about the alliance. It's not about come visit our parks. It's a
Right.
PSA. It's all about the work that we're doing around the world. As I mentioned, it's about that greater good mission, and that's what also helps get us picked up.
Well, and so a couple of things. One, you're clearly where you should be because of your desire, your penchant, and always looking for the greater good. So congratulations to you, David. And the second point I would make, and you mentioned it, is quality creative. Listen, you just used the example of 400 plus insertions, full page color ads. And the reason for that fundamentally was because of the quality of the creative. So your focus there, I really applaud. You've always been that guy. You've always focused on the quality of the creative and the messaging. And I applaud all of that. And obviously the San Diego Zoo and Wildlife Association is really lucky to have you. Listen, we've got a few minutes left. Thank you for the last little bit. That was all great. But I always ask each guest the same three questions at the end. So here we go. First question is your favorite mistake. That's the one where you really messed up, and none of us likes to admit that we do that, but we all do it, and we're going to make more mistakes going forward. So what's yours, the one that you learned the most from?
So I was at Universal the second time, and it was 2011, I think, and we were working on the Transformers the Ride attraction at Universal Studios Hollywood, and I was talking to our president, Larry Kurzweil, great president, and very
I
fine.
thought you might mention him, but it's because I've got very fond memories of Larry. I love that guy.
Yeah, he was president at the time, and I was pitching him on the campaign for Transformers, and at one point I said, well, Megatron is the leader of the Decepticons. And he looked at me and he said, what? And I was trying to explain the ins and outs of the film franchise. And the film franchise is what we created in the ride experience. And Megatron is in the ride as well as Optimus Prime. And I was saying, well, Optimus is the good side, the good robots, and Megatron is the leader of the bad robots, which is, as I was talking, I was realizing, wow, wait a minute, we're getting too deep. And that's what his point was. If I can't understand it, how is the consumer going to understand it? And that was a big lesson for me, that you always need to put the lens of your target audience, see what you're doing through their lens always, because it's very easy for a marketer to start, you know more than your audience will ever know about what you're marketing. You know the benefits and everything. And you have to be careful that you don't assume that they're right there with you and they're going to follow you. You have to imagine that you don't know anything about this product. It's hard to do, but you have to imagine that and then look at the messaging and think, is this too deep? Is this the right messaging to connect to a consumer? And a couple of years later, we opened the Harry Potter Wizarding World of Harry Potter experience. And I had seen some of the movies, but I actually, because of that conversation, that learning moment, I chose not to read the books because I felt that I would get too deep. And we didn't want to just attract Potter fans.
Right.
They would come. We knew they would come. We had to talk to the non-Potter fans to get them to come. So if you'd read the books and you were so into it, you would talk as an insider and you wouldn't get the non-Potter fans to connect and to resonate. So I chose not to read the books, which helped.
Right. I totally get that. And that's a great story because Marketing 101 says you must know your audience and speak to them in ways, means, whether it's text, whether it's music, whether it's voice, whether it's images, all of those things combine to make great creative, but you got to deliver the message to the audience that will resonate. And I love that one. That's a really good one. Second question, the favorite live concert you ever attended, and this might be a Philharmonic question, I don't know, where a female artist or a female-led band was the headliner.
I thought about that question, and it's not an LA Phil concert, although I saw amazing concerts there, but I'm probably bringing this up because it was very recent. I went to the Belly Up, which is in Solana Beach, which is this amazing little venue that's been there since the 70s, and 200 people max. It's a very small, intimate venue. Melissa Etheridge performed, and I'm not a Melissa. I never listened to her music except what's on the radio, and never really a fan, just because I wasn't really exposed to her. And I'll tell you, that concert and her energy and that experience being 10 feet from her,
right,
which also helped, that was, to me, what's such a fun and engaging and amazing concert. And it's also, because it wasn't that long ago, is probably why it popped into my head.
Well, no, that's a great call. So two things. One, she is a superstar in her own right and has been from the get-go. Secondly, for all the non-San Diegans that will listen to this podcast or watch us, the Belly Up Tavern, we call it the Butt, B-U-T, Belly Up Tavern.
Never heard that. Okay.
Has been in Solana Beach, to your point, for 50 plus years. And they're a very intimate club, great setting. Everybody who's ever been there knows it cold. The cool thing about the Belly Up is on any given day, a random A-plus star can show up and perform. And it's because Goldberg has, 60 years of music connections. And so the Stones play in LA, and really Jagger, and they're going to just pop in unannounced.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff happens here all the time. So that's a really good one at a great little venue. It's the epitome of the cool club in town. Not only breaks new acts and rising stars from garage bands to headliners. That's a good one. I like that. So the last question is your favorite word. We all know words matter. It's what you say. It's what you don't say. It's how you say what you say, but words resonate. So your favorite word and why?
Well, for this discussion and for my career, I have probably different words based on, my personal life and things, but for work and my career, the word that has always resonated and has always been important to me is learn. Because a lot of people think, okay, I went to college, I got my degree, I did this, I got my master's, I did this, I'm done. And I can now work and I can just do my job and never think about learning again. And that word, and I actually expanded to multiple worlds, ABL, always be learning, like ABC, always be closing. It's always be learning, always be absorbing, always be, if you have that perspective, then you're going to look at every conversation, every meeting, every interaction differently than if you didn't think of learning. If you didn't think of that, you would think, well, I can't wait to get out of this conversation, or I can't wait to get out of this meeting. I can't wait to do something more interesting. Well, if I'm thinking, well, what can I learn from this interaction? I'm going to take something away no matter what that's valuable to me. And that changes everything. And so I think learn, because it doesn't stop when you're young and when you are in college, and you should learn because everything changes every day, especially now. The media landscape has never had so much change.
Right.
And if you're not learning about where your consumer is going to get their information or to get their entertainment, if you don't know, you're going to lose, and someone else is going to know and be better than you.
Well, listen, it's evident by that few sentences right there, and earlier on in the episode, your focus on learning and your desire to learn and your passion for learning goes before you, and you've obviously progressed in your career because of that passion, not just, but certainly a really serious plank in your makeup and your desire to grow and learn. So that's a great way to end this. I can't thank you enough for being a guest today on the Best Boss Ever podcast.
Thank you so much, Carl. I really appreciate it.